Study session for the City Council for Wheat Ridge, Colorado for November 20th, 2023. We have two items on our agenda tonight. Item number one is public notice requirements for development-related applications, and item number two is appointment process for the presiding judge. We'll begin our meeting as we generally do with public comment. If you would like to comment on this, either item one or item two, you may do so now. I have no one signed up to speak. If you are joining us on the virtual format, if you would please raise your hand, we will bring you into the meeting. I guess just a moment to see if any hands are raised. Whoever on the IT side is...
We do. We have one hand raised. Don Underwood.
Okay. Mr. Underwood, if you would please unmute yourself and give us your first name and your last name and what agenda item you'd like to speak on.
First off, I'd like to thank Rachel and Scott for your efforts to bring the community together for a much larger than expected meeting to provide the neighborhood with the answers to their many questions. Unfortunately, our questions were not answered.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, this is not part of the public comment tonight. We're talking about notice requirements. And is that what you're speaking on?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you.
Because Corey asked me for suggestions on how to communicate better with the community, and I found some information out. Will that work?
Yes. Would you please give me your address? I'm sorry I didn't ask for that earlier.
4601 Teller Street.
Okay. You'll have 3 minutes to address the council.
Okay, so I guess I won't continue with my thank you. In that meeting, it was stated there'd be a follow-up, which that has not happened, even though all emails were taken. So I'm not sure what the communication breakdown is regarding that. But I also spoke with the United States Postal Service, per Patrick Goff telling me that, and the community in that meeting, the postage was too expensive to have a mailer go out. And with that, I have found out from them that you can do a Wheat Ridge all or a Wheat Ridge specific mailing. There is also the option to be more specific and leave out areas. This is called an EDDM, every door direct mail. If it is just one page, a flyer that's 8.5 by 11, without an envelope, the cost is 0.2 per piece. Very reasonable considering the need, as you saw, for additional communication, just in a different form from our leaders. And the EDDM has proven to be a great way to communicate. I would like this to be considered for the near future, as it is cost effective and ways to connect with the specific areas that I represent. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers joining us online? Nope. Okay, we will close our public's comment and go to agenda item number one. This is the public notice requirements for development-related applications. Mr. Goff, staff report on this item.
We do. Lauren Mikulak, our Community Development Director.
Okay, Ms. Mikulak.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for having me. I don't have any slides tonight, but I was going to talk through some of the content of the memo. As you saw, we don't have a specific staff recommendation, so we'll have plenty of time to sort of discuss your ideas and options. Mr. Dahl and I had the chance to talk through some options, and we had a few more brainstorms since the memo was written, so we'll share those thoughts as well. When this topic of public notice came up, I think it was mentioned at the time that we've worked really hard over the last number of years to expand the way that we let people know how things are happening in Wheat Ridge. And so the first half of the memo sort of describes that, expanding letter notice in the radius from 300 to 600, expanding from just owners to owners and occupants, increasing the number of signs, changing the design of signs, sort of a variety of different procedures and code amendments that we've done. And it's always still a good time to just double check that it's working. There's almost all provisions of the zoning code. There's a situation that arises that we didn't anticipate. So I think you're all familiar with the fact that we're here tonight largely because of the letter notice comments that we got related to the Bank of the West property. So just briefly, it was fairly unique, I think, in a few ways, which is why it merits a good conversation. It was a city-owned parcel surrounded by parcels owned by Foothills Regional Housing. It was subject to both a zone change and a sale agreement at the same time, which is fairly unique. It's for an affordable housing project, which can be a bit of a lightning rod. And the process of the zone change and the sale was happening at the same time that the first phase of the Ives went vertical, which tends to bring a lot of attention and a sort of acute, what is going on here, I would like to know. And I know some of you got those kinds of comments from neighbors of really wanting to understand what's going on. We have long acknowledged there is no perfect noticing system. I am intrigued by the public comment, and we'll look that up for a variety of potential mailings of a variety of projects. There's no perfect system. We didn't have a month ago the projects and properties map. We're really hoping that that continues to help expand folks' awareness of upcoming public hearings. That's a specific piece of information that goes on there as soon as we schedule a meeting. We tend to calibrate our online map and our newspaper notice to the general public, our sign notice to the passing public, and our letter notice to the quote-unquote kind of impacted public, which is always hard to measure, and there's not a perfect number. I did include in the packet the 2020 memo about how we landed on 600 feet, because that was a thoughtful and protracted discussion. We calibrated it sort of the size of a Wheat Ridge block. Obviously, the larger, well, not obviously, we measured the 600-foot radius from the property boundary. So the larger property is the bigger the boundary it's going to capture. The Bank of the West property was also really tiny, and it was measured from the Bank of the West property line, so it was a smaller mailing. So in the end, we can't change notice in the middle of a process, if we are starting to hear that feedback. That's just sort of a fundamental piece of due process rights that if we have questions on, Mr. Dahl can help respond to. But predictability in the process is important for both the public and the applicant. But here we're in the position of being able to talk about whether or not we want to make a change now. So we outlined a couple potential scenarios for consideration. We got a comment on Wheat Ridge Speaks with another idea. We can talk about that one too. So I'll run through the couple of options and analysis and ideas that we had and you had and the public had, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So our first option in the memo responds specifically, Councilmember Hulteen, to your request of expand letter notice for known assemblages. The intent being that if the letter notice uses a larger boundary of a potential assemblage, then you get the benefit of that larger mailing. I did go through the case log to see, how many other projects have we had this? There's very few other, there's no other exact example. I mentioned in the memo, I think the Clear Creek Crossing example. The challenge is determining what is a known assemblage. And, in the Bank of the West case, there were different ownerships involved, different phasing of potential future development, so some unknowns. Mr. Dahl gave some thought to sort of how do we articulate a known assemblage since we wrote the memo, so we can share those ideas too.
Sure.
Thanks.
We struggled with that a little bit, and I gave it some thought. And as Lauren mentioned, predictability is important, and a uniformity of a rule, at least a rule you're going to stick with, is important. You can't say, okay, this project, okay, this is going to be your rule. It's got to be in the book. And as much as we can, we try to have sort of the similar classes of applications treated similarly. And I get it. What we're trying to grasp here and embrace here is, well, yeah, but what about projects that are unique in this particular way? Can we describe them as a class? And certainly you can. You have the right to describe classes of projects, and that triggers classes of notice. And Lauren and I both gave thought to how we might address the class of large assemblages. And the two ideas I can think of, and they may not be great, but they're what I can think of, are we'd have to do it on the application form. We'd have to say, okay, what other property do you, the applicant, own that is contiguous with this property? Because applicants might own property in several places in the city, and that would be too much to say, okay, fine, but if you're trying to get at property they also own that's contiguous, that's not a part of the application that they need rezoned or special use permit or whatever, you could ask that question and make that a part of the application. That would be one door. Another door, what property do you own or what properties are you under contract to purchase, to get to the same issue, which I think is probably maybe more likely, or it feels a little more like the circumstance that we were looking at. There's no perfect way to define large assemblage, but you're going to have to, if you go there, you'll have to define large assemblage because that's a vague term without, a definition. Those are the two that I can think of that are responsive to the concern that was raised. You'd end up with a class that you wouldn't use much. As far as we can tell, we would have used it maybe twice. But that's my thought for, if you go down that road, how you start to articulate that class.
Yeah, and that approach helps because I don't like to use discretion where I don't have to. And so if we can make that a more bright line, that helps, I think, our staff and our applicants and the public understand what is and isn't going to be a bigger mailing. The second scenario is similar to that, the adjacent property under single ownership. I like the idea of the contract to purchase because frankly, most zone changes are under contract contingent on the approval of the zoning. So rarely is it all under one shared ownership. Third option is always on the table, which was expand letter notice in general. It's been 3 years since we went from 300 to 600. Is 600 the right number? There's, again, no magic number. We're probably in the middle of the range. The last time we looked at this, folks went up to 1,000 feet. So that's certainly an option. I did pull numbers today from our mailings this year. When we added occupants and we went from 300 to 600, we increased our mailings. This year's 11 projects have ranged from 129 to 699 mailings per application, so our average is 250. Biggest variables in there is whether you're adjacent to a multi-unit or apartment project. And then, we have the comment in Wheatridge Speaks. If you didn't get a chance to see it, it was a thoughtful comment about, why can we use email notice, or is a way that I can sort of sign up to be notified of things. And I was sharing with Councilmember Hoppy before the meeting, I don't know how our Notify Me feature works on the website, but there are probably a couple ways we could explore and do a better job of communicating. Is there a way to sign up, say, every time a meeting agenda gets published? It wouldn't be like project-specific email lists, but we have technology that we can make sure we're utilizing training and communicating about. We could talk to the software developers of Wheatridge Speaks and say, can you entertain a subscription list so every time a meeting gets published on Wheatridge Speaks that people just get sort of notified there's a meeting coming, and then they can self-select if they'd like to comment on those agenda items. So a few different ways to approach this, I think. No action is always one, so we included that as just a reminder of sort of what are we doing today. The last thing I'll mention is that the last 2 pages of the packet showed some maps, just to give you a sense what the 600-foot mailing was. I think it's the very last page, the 600-foot buffer for just the Bank of the West piece compared to the mailing list we did when the Pet Boys piece was rezoned a couple years ago, or maybe a year ago. So you can see that, it's not a huge difference, but the east side of that buffer goes a block further when it was against the larger parcel. So we're here to answer questions and respond to any ideas that y'all have thought of over the last couple weeks as well.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Lauren and Jerry, for working on this. Councilor Hulteen sent me a picture from that meeting at the Ives a couple of weeks ago, and literally I poked my head in. You can see a picture of my head creepily poking in through the door. But it was an interesting meeting. I think that we did quite a bit a few years ago to, literally double the notice here, and maybe it's not enough, just judging from what we're hearing. And I think, we haven't had a whole lot of rezonings actually really the last 4 years, but we did have one at 32nd and Wadsworth roughly a couple weeks ago, or a couple months ago. And I think we heard from a good chunk of the citizens there too, that they might have wanted more notice as well. So, I think rather than going into where Jerry was talking about, it seems like that gets really complicated trying to figure out what the assemblage is and all that stuff is. I would just say maybe we go to 1,000 feet and see what that looks like after that. To address the comment from Wheatridge Speaks, would it be possible, and by the way, Lauren, that map that you had, the interactive, that's really cool, and I posted that on social, people love that. Can that have some sort of a notification? Because we have like a notification system for Wheat Ridge Speaks, or for What's Up Wheat Ridge, for each individual project. Could somebody just sign up on that map, on that website, to get a email notification every time a new development project is in the works or something like that?
I don't know the answer to that. We can certainly ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just because that's a website specific to people who want to know about development, so that seems like maybe that might be the place. And then I think our website, the clerk's office, at least at one point, you could sign up and then the agenda packets would be emailed to you. So I don't know if that's still a feature, but hopefully that's still a feature on the website. Clerk, is that, he's giving me a thumbs up. So that's still an option too, so people can still sign up with that. You know, listening to our commenters' comments both at that meeting and tonight, you know, I know there's no perfect system. We're not going to get everybody. And I know that there are ways that the postal system can give, you know, but that's still going to take a big chunk out of the budget over if we try to send everybody in Wheat Ridge a letter for every development project, you know, big or small. That's going to get very expensive and very cumbersome real quickly. So I don't think we need to go that far, but I do think by expanding this notice and then giving people more options to get this digitally, I think that'll help quite a bit. So I'll turn the floor over. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lauren, thank you for working on this. I do see that the defining the large assemblage is sort of like muddy water. I agree with, we could potentially expand it to 1,000 feet. What I hear is that there's a cost difference and concern, and we don't share that currently with the developer. Currently, the city takes that on. And so I would be in agreement with changing it to 1,000 feet and splitting that cost with the developers. But I have one quick question though. Like with the Bank of the West property, where it's fronted on two sides with very wide street frontage, if something like that, if we look at our 600 feet and we back out the street frontage, then that would get us another block into the neighborhoods on the other sides of those streets. Would that be something that would be easy to calculate, or would that just make that calculation more difficult?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way that we run the address poll, it's probably going to be challenging, but I think it could be that increasing the overall radius is a good way to compensate it. Most of our right-of-ways average 60 feet in width. And certainly the Bank of the West, the WADS to the Upham or Vance block is unique in that it didn't have, it's a super block, that's what we call it. So I think the GIS tool, you just draw a numeric buffer. So I think it'd be better to increase the buffer than to try to force the map to remove the streets.
Than to do the math. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, so with that answer, then I'm in support of Councilmember Stites' suggestion of increasing it to 1,000 feet. I would just consider that we perhaps share that cost half-half with the developers.
Yeah, just, sorry, because if I make point of clarity, we charge a flat $200 fee per public hearing, and at the time it was like, it's like a little, cover some postage, cover the publication costs, cover some of the staff time. And we had said, I think either formally or informally, when we went from 300 to 600, we'll track the costs to see if this is something we can absorb. Now that we have this good sort of full year of this year and the last couple of years, I think that's a very appropriate response given the current postage costs.
Thank you. Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for bringing this forward. I'm going to touch on a couple of different things. First, I just really appreciate the community members who are thinking critically on different ways that we can address this. At the meeting that Councilor Ohm and I hosted, it was really clear that it was a communication issue as much as anything. And, and I know the city was following the letter of the policies that we'd given guidance on. However, the way that played out in the neighborhood just really created, a huge disconnection between what was happening and with the complexity of the project. So I don't want to entirely let go of the assemblage idea. I was thinking about this over the weekend, and the two instances actually have been fairly recent in the city that are analogous to this. And I was thinking about, everyone's getting more clever every year. I hope they are. And, it could be that acquiring, a small strip of land could increase the footprint of a project big enough to increase like the allowable density that would change fundamentally the form of the development. So, I mean, these feel like one-offs, but, small acquisitions of land fundamentally impact larger things. So I do think some sort of process, if not in affecting the notifying, at least through this, that it's really clear that a project or a parcel is intended to be part of an assemblage is important information, even if there has to be, it is, intended to be. I mean, there can be careful language around that in which we're identifying that there's risk in terms of, ownership and, there's things that happen after zoning. But I think it's really important that people understand when a property isn't being rezoned with the intention of it just standing alone, but rather being part of that. And secondly, with the idea around notifications that are coming up through here, I mean, we send a notification to the transcript for publishing our official notice. I mean, we could create an email notification list that receives the same thing we send a Jeffco transcript. So instead of having to do it by the meeting, just if we're publishing to the transcript notices for hearings, then perhaps we could send an email list through Notify Me.
Yeah, and we have that ability on our website where you can subscribe to pretty much anything that you guys do. You can get agendas from all of our different boards and commissions, including City Council, Board of Adjustment, Planning Commission. So we have that ability now. People can sign up and get that information.
Great. I used to get those emails. Now
Yeah.
But I think part of that is also communicating how to get that communications. I know we layer on there, and I know the city was for a while taking out ads in the Gazette periodically to remind citizens of ways to stay engaged. And maybe just through those communications, through Mayor's Matters, we're drawing attention to, if these issues are important to you. And the Notify Me page is a little bit, there's so much in it, and so maybe kind of bundling it a little bit better might be helpful. I do support the extension to 1,000 feet and splitting the cost with the developer. I think that, or the applicant, I think that sounds fair. But I am curious, I know these are one-offs, and we, Councilmember Hoppy and I talk about not litigating around like just specific one-off situations, but I think just really the intent of how that property's rezoning is gonna play into something larger is really important, because people, I kept thinking I would feel really misled by this too, even though that wasn't the intention. So better communications around, this parcel's not standing alone.
Councilor Weaver.
Thank you for this, and thanks for the presentation. I am fine. I was for 600 feet, but I would be fine with 1,000 feet, and I like the idea of sharing it with the developer. To what Ms. Hultine was mentioning, I think there are ways that we can notify, and I know we probably can't connect email addresses with actual addresses, because that would be a great way to notify people if we could just run the buffer that way in the program. I'm wondering if, in the idea of sort of bundling these concepts, because I think we run the risk when we increase the radius of piecemeal informationing people to death, to the point that then there are all these side conversations, which we've seen happen in other ways about the public hearing process, and I'm wondering if those notifications from the map, which I think that site is brilliant, and I think there's a lot of great ways we could do that, but if we could somehow connect that back to the study session packets, and because we are are putting this information out all the time. And of course, we all know what the story is because we've been sitting here and we know that piece of property was part of a larger thing. And, but so that people can go back and they can always go back to the whole story. And maybe the whole story is always going back to the 6 packets that where we talked about this, so that they're not coming into the public hearing and then saying, I just got this notice and we're already a couple months into this. And so I think there's a way we can do that with noticing, especially with the GIS capability and emailing people. But even with the actual letter of, hey, we discussed that things related to this thing on this date, this date, this date, and this date. All this information is out there. Just so they have one place that they can, if they're tracking their neighborhood or whatever, they can get the whole picture. Because I think what happens is one person hears a thing and then goes on social media and posts this thing, and then it becomes this rumor, and then it's this whole conversation. I don't think that happened here. I'm just thinking about other experiences we've had and how we now have a really, really great system that we're connecting the dots with right now. And I just think we have a really great opportunity to do that. So thanks.
Thank you. I have Councilor Dozman and then Councilor Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just so I have a little bit of clarity, I'm okay with extending it to 1,000 feet. I was also okay with the 600 feet, but I do want to align the neighborhood meeting letter notice with the public hearing letter notice. So I just want to ensure that those are going to match up when whatever decision that we end up making.
I'm glad you asked that because we didn't want to come up with too many hypotheticals in the memo, but should you have given us this direction, I was going to request the same. And the other clarification that I'd love to make sure I have is that whether or not this is specific to zone changes or any public hearing associated with development. So yes, I would definitely say if we change one, let's change the neighborhood meeting too. And then if you can just affirm, just as a reminder, zone changes go to public hearing, specific development plans go to public hearing, special use permits can go to public hearing, some types of subdivisions can go to public hearing. And right now, we just have one number that says if you're going to public hearing, no matter what you are, that's the number that we use, 600. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Councilor Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I guess I would say when I was thinking about the notice change, my personal assumption was that it would be all public hearings and that we would keep it aligned with the neighborhood notices also. So 2 quick things brought up by Councilwoman Weaver and Hulteen. I wonder if there is something that we need to consider as far as defining our notification, like putting our notifications maybe in a few different categories. Like if they're, like to Councilwoman Hulteen's point, if there is already a property that's purchased and they're gonna pick up another, let's say, lot next to it, and it's going to get rezoned, and it overall changes the density of the entire project. So, not like they're going to rezone it for the intention of increasing the density of their project, not just they're going to own that and we don't know what they're going to do with it for whatever. With the intention, then does that maybe trigger a new notice, which includes the original notice and notice boundary and information? In that situation. And also the notice having like the historical information attached, because yes, I just want to say that, when I know we've seen something and I go looking for it on the website, sometimes it can be difficult to find. The archives can be difficult to navigate sometimes. And so if there is something like that happens, right? So if we're sending out a notice and we're saying, this was already rezoned a year and a half ago, they now have gotten the opportunity to buy this new lot next to it, they're gonna rezone it, it's gonna become, purchasing is gonna increase the density. here is here are the links to the archives for the historical information. So you can read the memo or watch the meeting and hear the discussion around it. Because I do think that it helps with some of the conversations with when the rumor mill starts. But also, I also understand that there are people in areas that we've sent the notification to that will still come and say to us, because they found out from their neighbor, Mary Schmery, that this is happening, and they'll say, you didn't tell me. We can say, we sent that to your address and here's our proof, right? So that's going to happen always. Like that is not a narrative we're gonna ever get rid of. But I think that if we can make sure that we're making it as easy as possible, we're not putting the burden on the people to go find the information, we're making it as easy as possible for them to have the correct information. So so that's why I just wonder if like there's kind of a carve out with notices that we could maybe do.
I wanted to ask a question. You know, I've been seeing a lot lately that using a QR code in order to take you to a site, and I don't know that necessarily the QR code, but is that sort of what we're talking about, is that if we give you sort of the basics of an information, a postcard, if you will, but it's able to direct you to a site where we've got a summary or more case history, as you say, you know, where does this project stand from a background, you know, sort of a background idea? Anyway, Councilor Weaver.
All those things can be done in GIS, and it's pretty cool. And what I should have mentioned before is if you have not been to the Jefferson County Aspen site, you can go look up your property, and it has all of the historic records linked. That could be a very similar thing where the property has, you know, when you click on the property in, sorry, I'm looking at a screen in my brain. You would click on the property on a screen, and then all of those links would come up about the property, but they could be links to documents that have been happening in the city. And we could put QR codes on those public hearing notices that could then go to that map. And you could track properties, and I could sign up to track a property and get notifications when something else had been posted about it. That would be super cool. Is that crazy,
not get too
unreasonable,
cool.
illegal? Sorry.
And that is the intent of our projects and properties map, that each project will have links to all the previous information. They're not all populated yet, but I'm just looking at one right now. You could go back to the Wheat Ridge Speaks page that's got the video presentation from staff. It's got the staff report. So that's our project map. We'll do that. I don't think every property's populated yet with all the information, but we're still working on that.
And we could link city council meetings to that too, and the packet and things like that.
Mayor Pro Tem Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And, you know, I kind of think of it like, for a lot of people, this is a serialized TV show, right? And for a lot of people, they're jumping in at like season 7, episode 6, and like without a recap of what happened for the previous, 7 seasons. So, I think that having those links or having a QR code or whatever, I think that's great. I think we're still going to hear from people, well, what if I don't want to use technology? What if I don't? What if I, But at some point, if you care, you have to care enough to care, right? You have to care enough to do a little research on your own, and I know that that's not the most popular thing to hear, I guess, but like, at some point, if we're sending out the notices, you know what channel your favorite TV show is on, and if you want to watch it, you either subscribe to that channel or you don't, right? So, when I wanted to watch Game of Thrones, I had to get HBO, right? If I didn't, then, I just had to hear the summaries or something, so that's how it is. You know where we are. We're here every Monday. You know where you can get all the notifications. So we just need to make sure that we're sending that stuff out, I think. I would, and as we think about the assemblies, anybody who is going to want to do a bigger project over the next few years in Wheat Ridge, they're going to have to assemble a bunch of smaller properties together, right? Because you're not going to go buy a big property at this point, so you're going to have to assemble. So I think that might become more than just a one-off thing. I think it might become the future of anybody wanting to build bigger stuff. So having a classification like Councilor Hoppy said, to where if they are trying to assemble those properties, that it is sent out to the original people, I think that's maybe a good idea to go as well. So if we, I do think that we should continue the 1,000 feet for all public hearings as well.
Public hearing.
Thank you.
Counselor Hulteen.
Thank you. I have a somewhat sort of sidebar question. How long typically what's the standard for us to have a first reading, and how far out is the actual hearing? Like, what's our standard time?
The gap in time between the first and second reading, it has to be more than 2 weeks, so you most often see them 4 weeks apart.
Okay. And so that's like kind of the standard?
Yeah, our standard is like 3 to...
Pending where city council meetings
Exactly.
actually fall.
It's 3 to 4 weeks. We have a spreadsheet. It's like 18 to 25 days, depending on holidays or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of wanted just to check our process against like reasonable
Mhm.
time frame for people to, get information, digest
Yeah.
it, do their research, ask the questions.
It's a good question. So that gap in time is informed because the code requires a 15-day comment period, and we can't start that clock until you officially set the hearing date. So you can't go from Monday, first reading, 2 weeks later, it'd be 14 days. So there's almost always 3 to 5 weeks, depending on holidays.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Counselor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to see if I could ask for a consensus to move forward with changing our radius to 1,000 feet, sharing the cost of that with the developers, and having it for both public notices and neighborhood meetings.
Okay, it looks like we have consensus on that.
And then I would like to ask if we could have a consensus to have staff bring us back a little more information now that we've discussed more thoroughly our expectations of what we would like to see in advancement and how our notices look, and just see if staff can bring that back to us in the future.
Sounds like we want to move forward on that also.
Do you know what you understand that consensus? that
Yes,
last
I
one?
do, yeah.
Okay.
And if I can maybe just opine on it, I think we can do a better job of telling the story. Like, we write the history in the staff report. Like, we write that history the day we pre-app with somebody. So we have that story to tell, and we can put that in a letter. We've been using a template. We've been trying to make the template less, no offense, legalese. But there's more story that can be included in there, which can include QR codes or links so people who really want to dig in, like Bank of the West. We could have told the story of the WADS rezoning, and then the Pep Boys rezoning, and then the discussion on the sale. That all could have been there up front. So I think that's a great idea. Our GIS, you're right, there's a lot of potential. We're about to change over some staff there, so that sort of building the GIS map will have to take a little bit more time. The other thing I'm optimistic about is our new ERP. We use that software to track permits and land use cases, and there's the potential that it can have a public-facing portal, so you could, to your point, you could go to a record and see sort of all the activity, permits, zone changes, subdivisions that's associated with the parcel. So I think we have near-term, tell the story better in the letter, make those packets more easily findable, and then sort of next year, probably ERP stuff and GIS. So I think it all makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Terrific. Counselor Hulteen.
I'd like to ask for a consensus that we include inquiring about tracking and communicating intentions around assemblages as part of that process. And so that is included in the application. And then as that storytelling and all that communication is that any potential assemblage is communicated within that, recognizing there's a risk.
Okay. All right.
You good with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with understanding, you ask people, what are your intentions? And they can tell you at this point, no. because that's the truth for them. And that can change later. And unless we have okay, you have to tell us your intentions today, tomorrow, the day after the hearing. I'm not trying to be pejorative, but you see what I'm articulating, which is you can certainly say, tell us what your intentions are, tell us what property you own, and we'll make that a part of the public-facing information we present. But that's a snapshot. And unless you require more snapshots or a moving picture, you'll get a snapshot. And that may not remain. I think we have to understand that just people change. Business needs change, and that will evolve. And just there are limitations. I'm taking way too long to say. There are limitations on the accuracy of the information that you'll get, especially as time goes on. But you'll get information that you don't have now.
Councilor Hulteen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Dahl, and I appreciate that. I realize it's a snapshot, but we're not asking the question, and then the way that information is communicated is pretty haphazard. At what point anybody knows or doesn't know that it is or is not. So at least if we're asking at some point in the application and communicating what we know when we asked, then we have a point of origin of our understanding of the situation, and that's, I think, important to communicate. And I think staff will do a great job of developing sort of the boundaries around that and how to communicate that clearly, and that this is by no means certainty and there's risk all over this, but this is what we know now. Thank you.
Councilor Weaver?
To both of those points, I also think that in this communication that we should be very explicit that things do change and that that's a right by owner within the rules of, sometimes we're talking about a planned, sorry, I'm not going to remember the words, where it's the pre-plan before the actual plan, and it's what they think where buildings might go, and they think what the facades might be, or what the heights might be, but that's not what we're talking about yet because it's the plan before that. And so inserting that in the story too as well, because I know we've sat here and had people say, that's not what they said they were gonna do in the meeting at the planning, what's it called? No, there's a document before the actual document. It's the site area, the site plan.
Yeah.
No, the site plan.
There's
Conceptual site plan.
Pre-apps, neighborhood meetings, concept plans, planned, the outline development plan.
It's the outline development plan.
There we go.
Which is not the specific stuff.
Yep.
And the ODP, thanks. So I just want us to be aware that I think people also get caught up in that, in hearing somebody say, well, you said you were gonna do this, or you said it was gonna be priced this way, or you said, and I just think we have to let people know that there are things that get to change because of use by right.
But we also look at these hearings under a certain format of information that we're judging these projects against. And do we tread into muddy waters if an expectation that we have of a project is not part of the technical requirements that we're viewing the project in? I mean, it's one thing if we have discretion, to evaluate that idea, but are we moving into an area that's not part of the criteria that we use with which to judge these projects? In which case, that could color the way an applicant looks at it, or color our judgment if that is something that we shouldn't have that's not proper for us to influence. I guess that's just the other side of the argument, so.
Yeah, you raise a good point. Under the code, there's a list of things that the council considers and are the things you consider. What's being described, I think, is beyond that, whether and to what degree we inform the public about the penumbra. If I can, there's the stuff in the code, and there's this is the surrounding context that we want you to know about. In the end, I'm thinking out loud here because it's kind of a new concept, but in the end, the council's decision will have to get judged based upon what's in the code. The risk you run isn't so much a legal one as it is one of perception and of expectation of the public. Well, you told me all this stuff, how come? And so I'm not saying that means you don't tell people stuff. But what I am saying, I guess, and you've all recognized it in your comments one way or another, what I'm saying is that as you tell people that, you'll need to make that clear, that this is context, the council's role is somewhat more limited. So you'll just need to, as you're messaging it, you don't want to raise expectations that aren't true in the code book. It's, the consensus is what it is, and I would think that probably it's Lauren and my task now to sit down and say, okay, let's take some real examples. And how would we message that in a way that gives people the context, but does not provide expectations that can't be fulfilled? And sitting here today, I'm going to be better armed to answer that after we've looked, I think, at some examples, but the mayor's point is a good one, I think.
I think you see some of that language, like in this, again, in the staff report, probably too late in the game. Like, we're rezoning this to mixed use, the applicant intends to build multifamily, and you should be aware that every other permitted use in mixed use would be allowed should they decide not to build multifamily. So we're always trying, and it's why some applicants are not as forthcoming, because they know that they don't need to be for the criteria. But we can tell that story that comes in the staff report, buried in dozens of pages of analysis. We can tell that in the neighborhood meeting letter and just sort of educate people earlier, I think, yeah.
It's somewhat akin to the discussion we had not long ago about granting more administrative approval process because we don't really have discretion in the matter. So it's just following along that way, and I just think we ought to be aware of that. Any further discussion on item number one? Pretty good discussion? Okay, thank you, Lauren. Great report. And Mr. Dahl. We will move to our second agenda item. This is the appointment process for the presiding judge. Mr. Goff.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you all received an email or a letter, I think, from Judge Randall a few weeks ago. As you know, the city's current presiding judge, Chris Randall, is retiring effective at the end of this year after 22 years of service here at Wheat Ridge. Per the city's code of laws, the mayor has the authority to appoint a substitute judge, and he has done that. He has appointed Judge Paul Basso, and he is here in the audience if you haven't met him. Paul? So that appointment will be until City Council makes the permanent appointment, which we are asking for direction on this evening. Judge Basso has frequently serves Wheat Ridge as a relief judge and an administrative hearing officer his resume was included in your packet for your information. But Judge Basso has expressed interest in, first of all, the substitute judge position, but also the permanent presiding judge position. So under the Wheat Ridge City Charter, the municipal judge serves a 2-year term and is appointed by you all. If you remember, we just reappointed Judge Randall this last year, August sometime. The charter requires that the judge be a member of the bar of the state of Colorado, have a minimum of 5 years experience on the bench or in the active practice of law in Colorado. The charter and code lay out the other duties of the judge, which were summarized in your packet. I won't go over those unless you have any questions. Staff conducted some research on the structure and staffing of municipal courts in Colorado, again, which was in your packet. There are essentially 2 court structures, one of an administrative management model, which removes the administrative responsibilities from the presiding judge and assigns them to a court manager or court administrator, as Kirsten is here. Kirsten, I'm sorry, Armstrong. Do you know everybody? Kirsten Armstrong is our court administrator, and she's been here even longer. How long have you been here, Kirsten? 33 years. And the other model is the judicial management model, where the presiding judge is responsible for managing both the administrative duties of the court and also the judicial functions of the court. This is the current model we use in Wheat Ridge. Majority of cities that we did interview do operate under the administrative management model, which is different than what Wheat Ridge does. So with that background, staff is looking for some direction from City Council on 3 specific items. First of all, administrative versus judicial management structures. As I mentioned, we could, first of all, one option is to continue with the current staffing structure. In this scenario, the presiding judge acts as the department director, as Judge Randall has, and directly manages the staff. Or we could migrate to the administrative model, again, where council could assign the hiring and personnel management activities to a court administrator, such as Kirsten, who works under the direction of city management in a deputy city manager, or another area in the city. So that is 2 options. Staff does recommend this second option. We can talk about that more. The recruitment of the presiding judge, we're looking for some direction on that too. A couple different options are to direct staff to do a widely distributed RFP or just a job posting, as a lot of cities have done, to find interested candidates for the role of presiding judge. You could just have an interview with Judge Basso, who expressed interest, and see if he would be the person you would like to appoint. We do recommend, since it has been 22 years since we've had a judge, we recommend that we do at least a recruitment and ask Judge Basso to also apply along with any other interested candidates. The third area we're looking for is how these applicants are reviewed. A couple different options here are for City Council as a body to review all the applicants and conduct interviews on as many as you'd want. Secondly, to establish maybe some type of search committee involved with maybe a few of the City Council, some staff, maybe even some community members, maybe somebody from the Race and Equity Task Force, who would provide a list of finalists for City Council to consider, and that's the option we recommend, or direct staff to review applications and provide a finalist list to City Council. So those are 3 areas that we're looking for some direction tonight, but Mr. Dahl is here to help answer any questions, and as I mentioned, Kirsten Armstrong, and love to have a discussion about this.
Okay. Raise your hand, Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Judge Basso, for filling in the empty seat for us, so we have the opportunity to consider our options. Yeah, so after reading through the memo and looking at like the different comparisons against regional cities, I think that we really should migrate to administrative management model. Also, in part, that we're really trying to get some of our more positions in our city staff that are city staff positions, like the deputy city clerk, but not actually city staff positions. We're trying to get those more integrated and so that it's a same playing field for everybody. So I think the administrative model is definitely the way to go with that. I think an RFP would be great. I think that, it's been so long since we've been in this swimming pool that maybe we should, or this pond, maybe we should check out the fish. I think establishing a search committee that has community members on it is absolutely amazing opportunity for us to take. Elected officials and staff and whatnot, but to be able to include our community into this decision, especially because we don't vote on a judge, which it looks like there's one community that votes on a judge. So I think this is a great option for us to bring into our community, and what an opportunity. So those are kind of my positions on where we are.
Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mostly agree with what Ms. Hoppy just said. We haven't had this opportunity in a long time. I really appreciate staff thoroughly looking at what the options are and what are best practices. I agree actually for a lot of the same reasons Ms. Hoppy said, that we move to the administrative model. I think that that is aligning with generally what we're trying to accomplish in the city and would be also the best use of our new judge's time. I want to kind of smish together the other two consensuses. I really strongly believe that the committee, representative of, staff, elected officials, and as Ms. Hoppy said, community members, specifically would love to see the IDEA community members as well as some of the police advisory in there to, just provide like a really well-informed decision. But it would be really great if we could actually, here you call it a search committee and it's actually a selection committee under review committee. It would be really great if it was a search and selection committee and that maybe they could help inform the RFP. When we were doing our police chief search, that was a really thoughtful, iterative process that involved the community, even in what were the criterias and qualifications that were important for the candidate. And it has translated into a fantastic police chief for our city. So if we're gonna convene that committee, I would highly recommend we convene it to also help advise on the RFP and how the search is conducted in such a way that we are getting the kind of candidates that we really want to see serving our city, because our judge makes really important decisions that affects the lives of a lot of our neighbors. And so I would love to create that committee and have that committee advise on the RFP. I would like to see an RFP and then have that same committee review the applicants and present their finalists to the council. Thank you.
Councilor Weaver?
I agree with all of the staff recommendations with the inclusion of what Councilor Hulteen just said. And I also just wanted to thank Judge Basso for his work here. And it's always fun to read a colleague's resume. So thanks for all these cool things that you've been doing with the city of Wheat Ridge, and of course before that as well. But it's always nice to get to know somebody and their background. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Have we been to the market to see if our compensation package is competitive in this, for this position?
We didn't look at it at this last reappointment of Judge Randall, but we did the previous time. We provided that information to City Council, and that's something we need to do with this process also.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but at least the last go-around, we were definitely competitive.
Okay. Good. All right, further discussion. Councilor Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with the recommendations Councilor Hulteen and Councilor Hoppy put forward. I wanted to thank Judge Basso, and I wanted to thank Judge Randall for years and years of service. 2002. So he was appointed as judge about a year before my dad was appointed to council. So that's and they served together for a long time. So Judge Randall is fantastic. So I really appreciate all of his time and effort over the last 21 years. That's fantastic. So thank you, and thank you for the recommendations, ladies.
And for her inaugural comment, I'd like to go to Councilor Snell.
Thank you. And just a couple of quick questions on this. I do agree very much with the forming a committee, a search committee. That's a wonderful idea, especially including the Race and Equity Task Force IDEA committee members. Can you give me, or is there, what was the timeline for the police chief search? And does that timeline kind of translate to the same for the judge?
Yeah, geez, that's just been a couple of years ago. You think I remember, right? But it was right before COVID, so I forgot everything after COVID. It was a good 6 or 7 months, I believe. I remember going out the day after Christmas to interview him in Prince George's County. I can't remember when we started, but we hired a professional recruitment firm for that. That's an option here, or we could have our HR manage it also, or purchasing. We have examples of RFPs that other communities used. I think if we did it ourselves, it'd probably be a little bit shorter time frame. But yeah, I'm thinking it's probably a good 4 to 6 months probably still for a process, especially if you're involving a community members on. I think we want to make sure we give everybody enough time.
Councilor Dozeman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for bringing this forward. And I would also like to say goodbye and thank Judge Randall for his time here on the serving as judge. And I've had the opportunity to talk with him, and he's wonderful. And I really appreciate all of the questions that he asks when he comes to either present to council or sit in on any of the legislative updates. You know, as we were in COVID or coming out of COVID and addressing the social justice movement, I really appreciated his insight, and I think he's served our community very well. And I also want to thank Judge Basso for sitting in and in the interim, and I hope you do apply, because I believe it would be good and to put out an RFP. And can you maybe explain a little bit about the nuances between the administrative and current makeup? Because like I read in the memo that it comes down to the judge just doing the judicial duties, correct? And then somebody else doing more of the administrative. So would that just be like the paperwork and filing?
Yeah, I'll start, and maybe Kristen, you want to add, and Jerry. So currently, Judge Randall has worked into a bigger role here at the community than most judges do. He's considers himself a department director, so he comes to the management team meetings with the rest of the department directors, police chief, community development director, Ally, and such. And you know, with that structure, he manages, supervises staff, but then we do have Kirsten. She may tell you something different, actually how it works. Nothing against Judge Randall or anybody, but Kirsten is the court manager, so I think, you know, most staff falls under her, but I think maybe I'll let her speak to maybe how it's working today. What we're suggesting is that I think it potentially could be difficult to find a judge today that wants to come on and take all those duties. A lot of judges they have a lot of practice, or they're doing other work. The judge today is 30 hours, but that does include his department director work. So I don't know if we bring a judge on, would need those many hours to do just the court work. So, Kristen, did you want to add anything to that, or on kind of what the current structure is?
No, but I do agree with Patrick that a lot of judges would not want to do the administrative piece of the position. It's easier managed through my position, and then I would be reporting to, I'm assuming, city management. So you would not have an employee of the city reporting to a contract-appointed position. So that kind of falls in line with where the city would like that structure to be. That was one of the reasons for the recommendation. We would still, all of the staff would still take direction from the judge, because there would be legal implications that we would need to follow. They would need to give us some direction in that. So it's not like they wouldn't do any of that. It would just be that the majority of the administrative stuff would be handled through me.
And so if we move to the administrative structure, would it be a matter of the judge still serving in a capacity in which, like a leadership role, where they would, you know, either advise city staff or kind of be a department head and still be a part of those other kind of internal meetings?
Likely not. Again,
Okay.
I don't think most judges want that role. I think Judge Randall liked that part of it, and we kind of adjusted his contract over the years to give him those additional roles. But I think Kirsten has probably more experience with this with judges that, again, most of them I think are on a contract. They have other, they work in other courts sometimes. They have a law practice that they're working on. You know, maybe we could find somebody that would do this, but I think we're gonna have a better chance finding somebody that just wants to come in, be the judge. They wouldn't be coming to management team meetings. Of course, you know, they would come to any meeting that we might need them at. They probably have meetings with court staff and such, but most of that personnel management and those types of things would be handled between the court administrator and probably somebody in the city manager's office.
So I think one of the things that Judge Randall did very well was being really connected to our community, and I think serving in that capacity allowed him to be really connected. And so my concern would be kind of a, you know, just service and, you know, connection to the community. If somebody who no longer served in that role or that capacity, like they would come in and they would just preside, they wouldn't necessarily be a part of, you know, city staff and the community.
And actually, I do think that they would still have that role. You're just taking away the more administrative, supervisory, those types of aspects of their position that Judge Randall's handling now. So I think they would still have that ability to connect with the community, connect with staff in various different ways.
Thank you. Mr. Dahl?
If I could just add, I absolutely agree with Kirsten about the, you know, the structure of city staff then reporting to a contract individual from just a pure chain of command, employee, you know, discipline kind of standpoint. And I really think that it does need to be within the city, or should be. In my experience for other cities, the judge's role is one where they typically are not administrators. You go to law school and you practice law. That doesn't mean you also have an administrative degree. Sometimes you end up having to develop one, but it's not, I guess the point I would make would be that it's not something that judges necessarily expect to do or want to do. And the other point I guess I'd make, we've been so fortunate to have Judge Randall for so long, but these appointments are for 2 years. And I would hope that the next appointment is for as long, don't get me wrong, but I think it's important to design the structure with that in mind, because judges can change, and I wouldn't design the structure because of a human being, no matter how effective that person's been, you know, in the job. I agree with Kirsten too that it's absolutely part of the judicial code of ethics and attorney's code of ethics to outreach to the community. That's not something that you need an administrative role to do. That's something you believe in really strongly. I do training, and we all, as lawyers, you do that because not only should you ethically, but honestly, you enjoy doing that. I really enjoy trying to make the law understandable to people, not only just my clients, but the people I interact with generally. So if that's a concern, I think I can assure you that role, any judge will consider something that just ethically and personally, morally, they want to continue to do.
Thank you. Councilor Hoppe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask for consensus to mitigate, go ahead, sorry, Rachel.
Councilor Hulteen?
Thank you. So Judge Randall was at the CML conference, not this year, but the past year, and we were all together in one of the receptions, and I just, you know, I have thought highly of him forever, but he is so well regarded by his peers, and really through, you know, being able to talk with Judge Randall while he was talking with other municipal judges, and just really understanding, you know, his you know, his leadership and his, you know, thoughtful approach to his work here, and how he has not just done well with our community, but made other municipalities better for it as well. And listening to Ms. Dozman's question, I do wonder, you know, taking the judge out of the executive management meetings, I'm sure in those meetings he was really getting a sense of like, what are the things in the community that we are dealing with as a whole. And so I'm just sort of curious, if we shift to this administrative structure, like where would be the role of the judge in terms of communicating with senior city leadership and tracking what's going on in the city and the nuances of that?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Prior to Judge Randall, we had Judge Davis, and he was here for, I think, like 10 years. So how the structure worked then is I attended the meetings and that, but I always kept him very informed. He was before council for budget meetings, for other things that maybe if he was doing something different, like a new program or fines and fee increases. So even he was before council a minimum of 2 or 3 times a year. But he just didn't attend the EMT meetings. But again, he was very well informed of what's going on with the city, had a great connection with the city manager. So we could always structure it that I don't want to get the opinion that they're not going to have anything to do with the rest of the city, because that would not be accurate, if that's helpful.
That is helpful. I think it's just important that communication, and I was assuming it would happen. It was just good to know how that happens. Okay.
Yeah, and that position works for you guys, not me. So I think I think I would like to increase some communication between that position and council. And there's numerous times where when Judge Randall's in a management team meeting with us, we have to ask him to leave, because you can imagine a judge needs to stay very neutral and unbiased to a lot of things. And a lot of things we talk about in management team meetings are cases that may come in front of him. And he has to leave quite often, honestly. He does definitely have a different role than the management team, because he needs to keep a neutral position on things.
Thanks. That actually kind of led to the second part of it was, it dawned on me, he hasn't come in front of us very much in the time that I've been on here. Maybe he did a little bit more before. And so I think maybe as a council, us looking a little bit more closely at, how are we engaging this, our new judge in our policies, and calling forth for policy things and inviting the judge to come to us with some frequency. So moving forward, it would be great for us to be keeping that under consideration. Thanks.
Counselor Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask for consensus to migrate to an administrative management model with our judicial system, or our judge system, and that we create a search and select and advise, search and select committee that will advise on the RFP, and then will also be a part of finding us the finalist lists, which include elected officials, staff, community members, to council for final consideration.
Looks like we have consensus on that, unanimous, to move that proposal forward.
Yep, that's all we need. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Any other things on that item? All right, well, thank you very much for coming. Hope you have a great Thanksgiving. And that will conclude item number 2. I think we now go to
Thanks, Kirsten. Judge Basso,
staff reports.
good seeing you.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So, yeah, a couple things from me. I'd like to kind of regroup and debrief about last Monday's meeting just a little bit. We've been thinking about it a lot with staff, and Mr. Dahl and Rachel and I were just at the National League of Cities Conference and talked to some of our peers there on what they're doing with public meetings and public comment. And we're kind of looking for some direction this evening on if you want to make any immediate changes for next week's meeting. That could be temporary until we do more research, or they could be permanent too. But as the tradition is with 3 doors, we have 3 doors this evening. We could do nothing right now, just continue with what we've been doing. And I just want to back up a little bit. I think you all agree we don't want to overreact. We don't want to make any knee-jerk reactions, I believe, to what happened Monday. I don't believe it's probably going to happen again here in Wheat Ridge. You may have been seeing more and more news. It is happening across the country. There were 2 other cities in Colorado, I believe, that were hit after us in the last couple of weeks. But I think there's a few things we may want to consider doing. Again, we could do nothing, just continue moving forward. One thing we heard from a lot of our peers is they require, this would be a second option, require a pre-registration on Zoom. If you want to make public comment through Zoom at a council meeting, you have to register by a certain time, that day of the meeting. So we have a list. We could have them. We could even ask them to tell us what the topic is, if they're a resident or not. We don't necessarily have to ask for a full address, I don't think. So that's an option. A third option would be to not allow public comment through Zoom, still have Zoom meetings, but use our Wheat Ridge Speaks as the official place to make comments. They would be written comments in advance, and you would see those before the meeting, but that could be an option too, and stop the public comments through Zoom at the meetings. So those are three different things we're looking at. We're doing other research as we continue moving forward, but those are a couple things that we could do immediately if you want to for the next meeting.
Counselor Weaver.
Thanks. I like the second option. I like the registration. I do think it's a nice option to offer people in Wheat Ridge who can't come to a meeting or who are just getting home from work. That is a hard thing on people. But I think registering, if they want to come say something on Zoom, I think that's a totally fair option. So that's what I would like to go towards.
Counselor Dozman.
Thank you. I like the pre-registration option, but I also wanted to know if there could potentially be a requirement for video if they're coming in on the Zoom, but I know we also take calls, so I don't know how necessarily that would work.
Some cities, we've heard that, I think, from a city or two, that they're requiring video, but you're right, that we wouldn't be able to take a phone call in. Some people could say their camera's not working, so we may not get them to turn it on anyway. I don't know if that's something we could require, but I know some cities are working with that.
And I think in the main, you want to remain inclusive. That was the theme really of earlier, the first agenda item. And I agree about the not overreacting. There's a balance here that it can be achieved. And I know that there are members of the Wheat Ridge community that are not that computer literate, right? That has come up many times over the years, and people have said that's why we still need newspaper notices, why we still need mailed notices. So those are the people with just telephones. I will say that I put a message out on the attorney's listserv, the municipal attorney's listserv, and got at least a dozen really supportive responses with some, everybody stepped to the plate. I was really proud of my peers around the state. And I've been assembling a rather long list of the things that were suggested. They fall into similar categories, and I expected many of them. But the ones that are mentioned were main themes, limiting the amount of time, limiting, many communities say, okay, we're going to do that at the end of the meeting. So you're going to have to wait, and you're not quite sure when you're going to get your public comment, but we'll do it at the end of the meeting. Or saying we'll do it at the beginning of the meeting for X minutes, and then either we're done or you're welcome to log in at the end. And lots of what I'm expressing is sort of a huge bunch of sort of mix and match techniques. Registration, I think, is a really good idea. In part, this will affect what your council rules say, and you'll need to actually change them. So you might consider, we can certainly, and I don't mean to
Could we speak to the video piece first
Yeah,
before
sure,
we go
yeah,
on?
yeah.
Okay.
Ally wants to speak to, because it's a very
Okay.
good question, and I forgot. There's a very good reason we don't allow video. Ally?
Okay, Ally, would you like to?
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person tonight. Regarding your question, Councilor Dozeman, it's really interesting. I don't know if you remember at the beginning of the pandemic, the communities that were Zoom bombed, it was nudity and profanity on signage. And I'm really proud of the fact that we set our Zoom program up as webinar from the beginning because it allows us to control what's on camera. And so I just wanted to send a quick reminder about some of the lewd things that happened on HOA and city meetings at that time. So I would not recommend camera. I think, well, on the one hand, it might offer some accountability. On the other, I think it could actually be a little bit more challenging to manage. Thank you.
Counselor Hoppy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So with the pre-register, how far in advance could somebody register? Because if it's something where they can register on more than just Monday, then I
Yeah.
think that would be fair. Because if we're going to say you have to pre-register by a certain amount of time, right? Like, we cut off Wheat Ridge Speaks by noon. And so if we say you have to pre-register by a certain time, and when it's only available from Monday at 8 a.m. until, 5 p.m., well, somebody might not be able to get, they may be working or something. So what are we thinking? What are the time limits around being able to pre-register?
We would recommend it be aligned with Wheat Ridge Speaks comments. So as soon as the packet is out on Thursday, you can register, and then probably, we'd probably recommend up to noon on Monday, because that's when we cut off Wheat Ridge Speaks comments too, to keep it lined.
So, there were some people that got a hold of me and said, well, I think that, why are we even doing Zoom public comment anymore? And I would just say that we overwhelmingly get more positive interaction and feedback with our Zoom comments, and so I definitely want to maintain that. The pre-register with Zoom, I'm okay with that, as long as we have enough time, so Thursday to Monday at noon is good. As far as changing our council rules, I wonder if this is something, I'm just interested to know if this is something everybody wants to do forever, and we change our council rules, or is this something we want to do temporary? And I guess I would say, if our city attorney is going to come back to us with a different list of options, so maybe we should consider it temporary currently, and we can utilize the section 7A, suspend our rules to be able to do the pre-register on Zoom, and then when we have a more solid plan, then we can move forward, or we could change our council rules and then go back and change our council rules again. So just something to think about.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Stites, and I have Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually had the same exact question as Councilor Hobby, but I was going to actually ask it for a different reason. I was going to ask if we could push the registration up until maybe even 6 o'clock before the meeting, because some people who are going to use Zoom are going to be, well, I was going to go to the meeting, but I got stuck at work, and so I can Zoom in or something from the road. So if they can register up until maybe like 6 p.m. or something the day of, we still have all the information. They're still going to do their public comment. I don't know what the benefit, I guess, for us is if we have that 6 hours in advance. I mean, I know why it's a benefit when it's a written comment, but I'm not sure that we have a benefit when it's going to be somebody who's going to get on Zoom anyway. I would actually push it up until about 6 p.m. On that, but I agree that going to some sort of registration system, but I also think temporarily. I don't think that we need to knee-jerk overreact to anything at the moment. I think that and I was talking to Allie, I think about this last week, there's been hundreds of meetings that we've held via Zoom, via, council meetings, planning meetings, public meetings, different things like that, and this is the first issue we've had. So I think that we should just kind of stay the course, add the registrations for certainly next week and maybe temporarily moving forward, but I don't think that we need to make any permanent changes at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you. I'm trying to think about all of these as kind of, and how do we make them as analogous as possible? The intent of Zoom is to open up accessibility to civic voice for people to be able to join us when they would otherwise not be able to. And so I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Stites. You're still Councilmember Stites though too, yeah, you're all the Stites. That, cutting not, I mean, I would be fine if it was even just at, same time we pull the sheet, that we then, if you aren't in line with your hand raised, like, that's it. With the intent being that what we're doing with this consideration is saying there might be times when we have 100 people, let's just be crazy for a minute, but like we have an extraordinary number of people who want to give comment, whether they are mysterious people from across the country or people within our own community, and knowing how many people want to give comment at the beginning of comment would allow the mayor to, say, we're going to do 45 minutes worth of comment, and anyone else is welcome to provide comment at the end. I mean, it's a matter of like administering the meeting to be, give consideration so that we can conduct our business. And so I also want to give the same consideration to people signing in and giving comment in person. If we're gonna create those restrictions around virtual comment, then I think having the same consideration for in person. And I struggle with that a little bit because more than one famous story from watching Channel 8 at my house, getting worked up, getting in my car, driving over here and like giving my comment. And that's, I think, one of the things I've loved about Wheat Ridge. And I think those were actually both for public hearings and not public's right to speak at the beginning. But I want to try and keep the online and in-person as analogous as possible so that we're managing, giving as much access, but also managing the meeting in such a way that we can conduct the business. So I'd like to, I'm fine with if we cut it off at 6:30, they have their hands raised. And then, but I guess I'd like to give the same consideration if we're doing that with online, then I feel like we should be doing the same thing with people who are here. And it pains me, Ally, to hear reminders of why not to do the video, because I'd really like to push for the video, because part of this is recognizing our neighbors and personalizing when you have to have a face to your comments and our neighbors. I think it humanizes our work a lot more. So I know we can't require it, but it's good to encourage it so that it's relational civic space. So those are my thoughts. Oh, and as for temporary, I'm fine with temporary if we feel like there's other things we want to revisit. But if this is the only thing in council rules that seems to be coming up for us, then I just assume we adopt it so that we're doing consistent communication and not having to say, hey, community, it's this, and then in 3 months saying, okay, well, now it's actually this, because as we learn, communicating takes a lot of effort.
Councilor Snell.
Thank you. One quick question first, and if it's a silly question, it won't be my last. Is there any sort of a connection or requirement that when they give the address, that it actually has to be in Wheat Ridge? And they can't, no, that's not a thing, okay.
I think the reason that is asked probably at council meetings is to give it some perspective. Is this person
Which district or whatever?
in Wheat Ridge, or is there a comment coming from another community? So it just gives you some perspective. I don't think legally we need to ask an address.
We ask because 90% of the time people will say. It really helps council members to know, not only are they in the city or not, but what, district, where are they? And that's useful. If people say, no, I'm not comfortable with that, then that's fine too.
Sure.
Because you don't want to exclude people by virtue of requiring them to give their address.
Sure, okay. Thank you for that clarification. I am in support of the pre-registration, and I do think there's a fine line between, not having a knee-jerk reaction. We certainly don't want to do that, but also being proactive and making sure that folks know that we are not going to stand for what happened last week. So, thank you.
Councilor Dozeman.
I would just like to vocalize my support in pushing back the deadline. I would prefer to allow people to sign up as close to the beginning of the meeting as possible, just in the event that they had every intention of being here and for whatever reason couldn't be, and still giving them the opportunity to speak, or like Councilmember Holteen said, that, you're just spurred to come, and hopefully they'll just show up because they live close enough. And I think, our residents of Wheat Ridge tend to be the most observers of Channel 8. But yeah, I'd like to push that back as much as possible. But I do think that pre-registering in the event that we have to address something like this again in the future would be beneficial. And as for temporarily or permanent, I agree with Councilmember Holteen. If this is going to be the only change, then I think we should make it, change our council rules. But if we're going to be considering other options, then maybe doing that all in like a holistic package. Thank you.
In this order, Weaver, Stites, and Hoppy. Weaver?
I was just curious, well, I have two questions. First of all, was the public able to see the list of names that we saw on the screen?
I don't believe so. I think you have to be Ally, can you hear that question? I think you have to be
Yeah,
Okay.
they wouldn't have been able to see it. Yeah, you have to be a panelist to
Okay.
see.
So is there any legal way, because it was very obvious after a few minutes, just based on the incredibly rude names that were posted there, is there any way we can recognize or say, this is a hoax, basically, right? These are not real people? Because what they wrote was also very inflaming, I thought, too, with the names that were listed. And so I was just curious if there is a way of recognizing, because it took us about 5 or 10 minutes, but then it was very clear what was happening. And yet I felt like there was no way that we could stop what we knew was going to continue when it was very obvious. So yeah, I was just curious. I'm glad those names were not reported, but yeah.
Mr. Dahl, do you want to speak to that and the First Amendment implications, I suppose?
Sure. You know, it is the First Amendment, and so it cuts both ways. And the fact that you hear 5 statements that you really don't agree with, that are abhorrent, et cetera, you've set up a forum where you've said to people, non-agenda items, we will hear your comments. And when you set that forum up, and I know you know this, you have to take those comments. And the fact that you didn't like 9 of them in a row does not mean that you can't take the comments. What the council did was, I think, the right thing to do. It observed what was happening kind of in real time and made an adjustment, you know, with the time frame, it was your motion, and limiting the amount of time, and that was fine. But you know, the names people give and what they say is that becomes something you've invited, and so you've got to take it. Now, there's also one of the main themes that came out of the attorney's listserv was, you know, it cuts both ways, which means that you are not required to sit there and not call things out as lies and not call things out as horrendous, and you did so during council member comments. One thing you can consider, it would change the dynamic a little bit, is feel free, you know, you could consider actually responding to speakers, saying, okay, before the next speaker, I want to say that was a lie and that was terrible. And you have the right, you know, you have the same First Amendment rights. Now, you structure that as you choose. The way it's been done here is you save those comments and you do them at the end. It may be that council would want to have something more of a real-time ability to respond, which is really more responsive to the concern you're raising than some kind of, here's the list and let's sort of show on screen who they are. And I'm not sure but I think it's more responsive to the heart of what you're raising.
Yeah, certainly. I just was wondering if there was anything we could do when it's very obvious what is happening. Because I do think we felt, at least I did, I felt very angry and wanted to respond in some way. And anyway.
Let me talk for just a minute, because the time to do that is the way that we structure our public comment. And there's a couple of things, because I run the meeting. And one of the tools that I have to limit public comment is, as Councilor Hulteen said, we've got too many people talking for too long if we do 3 minutes, and we have business to do in this council after this part in the agenda. So that's the balance that you have. With respect to people being able to really, and the Zoom that we're using it for is really a telephone. So it's very familiar to our parents and our grandparents, this form of communication. And we're allowing people to come into the meeting where we used to only allow them to come in here and speak or to write a letter to be read at council. Now we invite the public in to speak on the telephone. the way to understand, and you have to, you know, if you're going to come in and speak here, you come in and you sign up. So you sign up, when public comment starts, Mr. Dahl goes back, gets the list, and this is the list of speakers. And I think that we're fair to say the speakers that have signed up are the people that are going to speak here tonight. We can afford the public that phones in, and I think it's good that we have extend that as far as possible, but I should have a list of the people that are going to join us on the telephone with their name and their phone number or their IP address. And I think we capture that information, right, when they come on, or?
We can see, yeah.
I mean, you know, so, and so that I'm able to look at, you know, you have a few minutes to look at, well, these are the people that are signed in, you know, it's between Mr. Dahl, you know, handing it to me and getting off the podium, and, you know, it's showtime, you know, so, well, the first one on the list is you know, Bill Smith or whoever. But at least if you have the comments that are coming on the phone, you've got the list of speakers that are going to speak at tonight's meeting. And they've made a decision they want to speak. We're going to listen to them speak. But you're able to say, well, this is how much time is allocated to it. And if we need to cut time to 2 minutes or 1 minute, or there are other things, and Councilor Hulteen brought up the 45-minute proposals that we use at DRCOG. You know, we'll take comment for 45 minutes, and then after that, we'll take public comment after the meeting. I'm not a fan of that. We've never done, you know, the COG has never, in my history there, gotten into, you know, if you get one speaker to come and speak, and Mayor Pro Tem Stites was right. In the time that I've been here, this hadn't happened. You can count on your nose the number of times that last week's events happened. But I think, you know, and then to, you know, other cities, I've been asking, they take comment, they allow them to tape comment. And I said, no, I don't want to tape comment, because what if you want to listen? What if you listen to it? You say, well, I don't want to hear that tonight. You're in a real pickle, constitutional pickle with that. So I think, you know, you try to give everybody a fair chance. They can either show up, sign up and talk. They can call in by 6 o'clock. If that allows staff enough time to generate a list, here's the people that are calling in, then, you know, we've taken care of it. And we still can't, you know, limit the content of their speech, you know. So that's going to be something we're going to need to close our ears. But when I first got on a council, there was a gentleman that was making the rounds in Jefferson County and you know, and was up in Westminster and out in Aurora, and we had prepped for that 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, not thinking that it would not be someone in person, but someone online, you know, so maybe we dodged that bullet, and, you know, there may be other people that show up doing that, but I think really if we can set a set of rules, and I was looking at our current rules we enacted in June 1st of 2021, so they're moving on to 2 years plus old. I haven't looked at them, but we should, you know, make sure that we're clear with these procedures on it, so that you can look at the rules and say, yes, we have a rule for that. Anyway, I'm big on being you know, a country of laws. You know, the rule of law is pretty important. So, sorry, I have Mayor Pro Tem Stites in the queue.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Stites. I just wanted to mention that we do have some tools. It doesn't matter that they're fake names like the attorney has already opined on, but we can respond more quickly, right? And so this hasn't happened to us before. You know, me making in the motion to suspend the rules, and then we put the time limit on it, and the you know, per minute comment. We can respond more quickly next time. So if we are looking at the list and it's starting to look suspicious, then, you know, we can do that. So, yeah. We just have to be on our toes.
Additional discussion.
Sorry. I'd like to make a consensus that we move forward with the second option, that we require registration, let's say up until 6:30 when the meeting starts, and then is that enough time, do you think, Mr. Goff?
Not if the mayor wants a
list.
printed list.
Gotta have a list of the
Six
people.
is gonna be pushing it too,
Can we
but
say-
we can try 6 and see how it goes.
Let's try 6,
Yep.
and try that then. So, I'll allow registration up until 6 PM the day of the meeting, and, we make well, and let me ask, Mr. Dahl, you said that you had a kind of a list of recommendations you were gonna bring forward, so is that gonna be here in the next few months?
Yeah, so right away, I've
Okay.
created a draft list just over the, last couple days.
Okay.
And what I would suggest is you'll have what you want to do right away, registration, maybe 1 or 2 other things. And then I would like to bring to you, probably at a study session quickly, here's this other list. And it's kind of the totality of what I've been able to learn. And it may be that inspires you to adjust slightly, but not much. I agree with, okay, this happened, but it doesn't mean we have to turn things completely upside down. But I think it would be helpful for you to see what other people are doing around this, and it may inspire you to adjust it a little bit. So I would suggest maybe a 2-stage thing here, what you're talking about tonight, right away. And then I can bring this, and you can say, okay, let's add this additional item, and then trigger it for a rules revision. I wouldn't start rewriting the rules between now and a week from now, because among other things, I think it will be well for the mayor to have in the rules the ability to do very much what Councilmember Hoppy's motion allowed him to do, changing, limiting it to a certain time, limiting the amount of time, so that he kind of has those tools already for what maybe won't happen again, but if it does, we won't have to do a recess, and then figure out, okay, are we going to run this motion, which actually I thought happened pretty smoothly. But we could probably build that into the rules a little bit. So what I'm taking too long to say is maybe next meeting you do another motion, yet again, to suspend the rules to have this, whatever you're going to do. But then pretty quickly after that, I can get you the list. We can decide what things ought to change within the rules themselves, and we'll get that codified.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Okay.
Cool.
Mayor, Counselor Dozeman we got a few more questions, I guess, so if you can hold off. You're okay?
Okay.
Was there anybody? Okay, so let's go to Hulteen and then Hoppy.
Okay, so I guess, back to civic process, communicating our cutoff for signing, I mean, if we're changing with a week's notice when people can join on Zoom, I mean, I know nobody wants what happened last week to happen again next week, but I would prefer we pick a date out a little bit that we're changing that sign, because, I mean, right now, people in our community think they can get on at 6:30, and I think a week's notice for that change is just not enough, I think, especially with the holidays and stuff. So I guess I would like us to consider a little more reasonable notice, just even 2 weeks or until the December meeting, just to give people, so that we're able to communicate it, get it out on socials, make sure it's in front of people, that they know that if they want to participate, they've got to register by 6 o'clock or whatever that cutoff is.
Counselor Hoppy?
Yeah, I have a suggestion that maybe for we do it until 6:30. We don't have a printed list necessarily at 6:30, but we do that for the next couple of weeks while also informing people that it will switch to 6 o'clock. Then that gives us a chance to notify at every meeting also, this is going to be happening. And, first off, we're asking for a pre-register, but then also this is going to be happening and it's going to be, 6 o'clock in the future? Does that?
But it's the pre-registration that people have to get used to before next Monday, I think is what Rachel's speaking to. It's not the time.
Well, but you can get on, if we're keeping it until 6:30 for the first couple of meetings, then they can hop on at 6:30.
Yeah, I suppose, but they might be surprised that they have to register.
Yeah.
Could we in the interim, when we pick up the list of the people that have signed up to speak, so I know the speakers that are in the hall, could we say, if you're online and want to speak, raise your hand now? and we give it a minute or 2 minutes, and then those are the speakers that we have.
I don't know, administratively, that's gonna be very easy. People come on every other second,
Well,
online.
So who's got the yellow hand up?
So you're gonna cut them off. I'm not sure where you're going with this. So if their hand's not up by certain time or when you call it,
Well,
and people come on, we're not gonna, it might be hard. It's just gonna be hard for us to manage, I think, as staff.
I mean, can you, and I don't know the technology, can you take a screenshot of, at a certain time?
May I?
You may.
Sorry. Hi, Mayor and City Manager. Sorry to butt in. Actually, I think I understand where you're going with this, Mayor, because to be honest, the city of Eugene was recently Zoom bombed. They require pre-registration, but they let it go right up until the start of the meeting. And so, frankly, it doesn't. I would just like to say I'm not sure that how much that will help us deter what happened. But I think, Mayor, what you're suggesting is perhaps we stick closer to door number 1. Do nothing, not require pre-registration, other than to say when you open up public's right to speak, you say anybody online that would like to speak, now is the time to raise your hand, and then at that point the city clerk can kind of jot down the names. You get through whoever's in the room like you always do first, and then you turn to that list, and there's sort of no new hands raised, I think is what you're suggesting. I think we could try that, and maybe that's an option. Maybe we start, rather than jump into pre-registration, especially if there are concerns about getting the word out, maybe we take more of an interim step.
It seemed to make sense for me just in the interim, because I do think we should have a good study session with Mr. Dahl to understand some of the other ideas that are around. Councilor Hulteen.
Oh, I was just wondering if you could ask people to raise their hands and then promote all those people to panelist. And then you can only.
Well,
But then they can turn their.
Then we can Zoom, then we're subject to Zoom bombing. We're opening the video screen instead of opening the telephone, so.
Okay,
I would argue for
Okay.
just the telephone myself.
all right.
Mr. Stites.
I would argue that we don't go back and we just continue with what we were going with before, because I think that our residents and our public, just kind of reading what I've read over the last couple of weeks, they kind of expect us to do something. And I know I said that we shouldn't knee-jerk react to anything, but adding a little bit of security just to make sure that this doesn't happen again, I think makes total sense. And I think the easiest way to do it is to cut it off at 6. And otherwise, we're just in the same, if we're asking for people to raise their hand, we're in the same boat that we were in before. So I think that we can all promote it as best we can on social media. You can send out a blast to whoever, but I do think that we should cut it off at 6 and just move forward. So I'm going to ask for a consensus that we move forward with pre-registration. We cut it off at 6.
For the next meeting.
For the next meeting, and that we make it temporary. We can make another motion at that meeting until we have the study session with Mr. Dahl. So, consensus?
Yeah, that's
Yes,
okay.
got one?
That's
Okay.
okay with me, yeah, I think that's good. I mean, I think we don't, we may jerk the knee a little bit, but it's not a big knee jerk, and we want to bring, we've been sort of, it's kind of ironic that my thing has sort of been encouraging people to, geez, I'll give you a little more time if you're here in the hall and haven't signed up, come and speak, and we got burned one time, but, let's be reasonable about how we sort of structure the meeting and have an organized flow so who's coming to speak. It's not that you can't come and speak, everybody's welcome to come and speak. On the address thing, when the press queried me about that, I said, I inherited that. I think the reason that we do it is to try to give our council an idea of who's a constituent and who may not be a constituent. And I think if you said, are you a resident of Wheat Ridge, yes or no, that That's one question that's pretty legitimate and easy to answer. You know, if so, what council district are you in? That's another step further, if that information. But, you know, I don't think we need to put people, you know, some people don't like to give their address anymore. It's, you know, maybe areas a little further away. But, so those are some of the other things that I think that we would want to put on the agenda for a more thorough discussion. Okay? Anything else in staff reports?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Elected officials matters. You were out of town, you should have a
Yeah.
report for us.
Oh, my gosh.
on,
Yeah, so Patrick and I were in Atlanta last week, and Wheat Ridge was recognized by NLC. It was what did they call the part,
The milestone.
the Milestone Award, which recognizes Wheat Ridge's 50-year membership tenure with National League of Cities, and I was up there with Salt Lake City and Youngstown, Ohio, and Sunnyvale, California. There were 11 communities altogether, although we were called Westridge. So they didn't get our name right, but it was pretty exciting to be up there and be recognized. And it was a great conference. They had phenomenal guest speakers, including Jose Andres, and just a lot of great inspiration. But really, that conference is all about talking to peers from across the country. And not only did I learn a lot, but also we're doing great things here in Wheat Ridge. And Olathe, Kansas is really interested in our community policing model. And so it's just a great exchange of ideas. And so I just really want to thank the city for letting me go. And it was a good time. And Atlanta's pretty awesome. So that was my happy thing. And then I did want to make a comment about last Monday. It took a good, at least full day for me to process what had happened. I mean, we kind of processed a little bit on the dais, and I woke up the next morning and it was just really thick and heavy. And I just want to recognize that was a horrific experience on the dais, but every other minute in this community, even when it's people who I'm not agreeing with, we are surrounded by extraordinary humans in Wheat Ridge. And for as hard as last Monday was, Tuesday was just filled with 100 little interactions with people that reminded me of why we do this and why it matters. And things like that are going to happen, but our community is better and stronger than that. And the outpouring of support from our community that I got on, Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday was extraordinary. So while those, the people who called in and lied to us and said some of the most horrific things I've ever heard, they don't know what this community is and how we treat each other, and we do. And I'm sorry for them. They don't know who they're messing with, but I do, and we're an incredible community, and it's because of our people. And I just want to recognize them and thank them.
Thank you. Additional elected officials reports. Councilor Snell.
Just wanted to mention I was at a wonderful event on Saturday morning, the Feed Your Soul Fund Turkey Trot, and they're going to make it an annual event. It was great. I am so happy there's a turkey trot that's not 10,000 people on Sloan's Lake, and for it to be so close. But so many folks from Wheat Ridge there, so many great small businesses represented, vendors, and just representing their organizations and businesses there. And proceeds from the registration went to the Feed the Future program, the backpack program that happens at Stevens Elementary. And I talked to the organizers afterward, huge success, and they're hoping to double the participation next year. And that's wonderful. And I just think also it's just a great event for our community. So just wanted to give a quick shout out there.
Thank you. Councilor Dozeman.
Thank
were
you.
next.
So I'll just build on that because Councilmember Snell and I were both at the Feed Your Soul Fitness Turkey Trot. So it was a wonderful first year, wonderful event for the community, really good showing of Wheat Ridge businesses and organizations. And so hope to see it double next year. And if you're interested in taking any classes, definitely check out Feed Your Soul Fitness. I've been doing some strength training there for a couple of months, and it's been a really fun program. So definitely a good business to check out in the community. Thank you.
Additional. Counselor Weaver.
I just wanted to report that the way that I felt better after our experience Monday is that I moved goats from one Wheat Ridge Park to another Wheat Ridge Park. So went from one side of Wheat Ridge to the other. So east side Wheat Ridge, you got your goats in the house. So please go visit them at Happiness Gardens. They will be there for another few weeks through December.
Good.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Counselor Stites is okay. Counselor Hoppy?
Sorry, yeah, sorry.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had the opportunity to go to the Business Association breakfast meeting last week. Always a lot of fun, great businesses there. It was Mr. Biscuit's one-year ribbon cutting on Friday, as well as one of our local chiropractors. So that was really cool to see our business community growing and doing phenomenal. After Monday, it was a little surreal, but I think what was really cool about our community is I had a number of people reach out and say that they wanted to come either, next Monday or whenever it is and give some positive comments and talk about great things in Wheat Ridge, great things going on in the world, whatever it is. So we do live in a great community, and thankfully those people that called in on Monday aren't part of it. Thank you.
Counselor Hoppy, anything tonight? I had just a couple of things. A week ago on Monday, it was really my honor to do a ribbon cutting at the I-70 32nd Avenue Bridge with CDOT. They're really great people. This was a great project for them, I'll tell you. Director Liu was there, and former Congressman Perlmutter showed up because he had been in the groundbreaking. But everybody really enjoys that project. They're really jazzed about the Harlan Street Bridge and the Ward Street Bridge, and are jazzed about doing other bridges in our community and other stuff. I also went last week to the Airsay Arvada Wheat Ridge Service Ambassadors to Youth breakfast, and really inspiring group there. We support that group, which provides scholarship funding for kids to go to Red Rocks, so underprivileged kids. So that was really great. On Friday, I participated in the Arvada Chamber of Commerce has a mayor's roundtable up in Arvada. So the new Arvada, Lauren Simpson, or the new mayor from Arvada, Lauren Simpson, was there, and the mayor pro tem from Golden, and the mayor from, am I forgetting another mayor? Which other mayor was there? Anyway, another mayor, but we had Mayor McNally from Westminster. But we had a good program there. People, Wheat Ridge scores really well. I'm so proud of being the mayor here. There's so many great things to talk about. We went to two ribbon cuttings last week, Colorado Osteopathic and Integrative Health on 44th, and as Mayor Pro Tem Stites said, Mr. Biscuits, what a great group over there. I've had more comments about what we did right last week than anybody said that we did wrong. So I want to really thank you all for stepping up there and being part of a group that addressed the situation and were responsible about it, and really, I think, did the right thing. So I want to make sure that we always afford all the constitutional rights that our citizens are entitled to, that we conduct these meetings fairly and openly, and that we get our business done. And I think we did as good as we could there. And lastly, Thursday is Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Anything else? Okay. With that, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.